I looked at your face, and suddenly my heart didn't know what to do anymore. It didn't beat faster. It didn't skip a beat. It didn't simply race. No, it jumped all over the place, like a frightened bird escaping an open cage, like a compass that had somehow forgotten where north was, like every emotion I had spent years carefully locking away had just broken free all at once. And the strangest part, you didn't even know it. You were simply standing there, maybe smiling, maybe thinking about something completely ordinary, maybe unaware that in that exact moment, someone was looking at you and feeling their entire world shift by a few degrees. Funny, isn't it? How life can remain unchanged for years and then change in a single glance, a single face, a single moment, a single heartbeat that suddenly refuses to behave. I wish I could explain it logically. I wish I could tell you there was a reason, that it was your eyes or your smile or the way the sunlight happened to fall across your face that day. But the truth is, it wasn't any one thing. It was everything. And somehow, at the same time, it was nothing I could put into words. Have you ever met someone and felt as though your soul recognized them before your mind did, before logic could interrupt, before fear could step in, before all the walls you've spent years building could remind you to stay careful? That's what it felt like. For one brief second, every defense inside me forgot its job. Every warning signal went silent. Every scar from the past stopped speaking. And all I could do was look, just look, as if my heart was trying to memorize every detail before time could take the moment away. Because moments like that never ask for permission. They arrive unexpectedly, like rain on a cloudless afternoon, like music drifting through an open window, like a forgotten dream suddenly returning years later. You don't plan for them, you don't prepare for them, and yet they change something inside you forever. I looked at your face, and for a moment, the noise disappeared. The endless noise, the worries, the responsibilities, the disappointments, the exhaustion that quietly follows us through adulthood, all of it faded into the background. Not because my problems disappeared, but because for the first time in a very long time, they weren't the only thing I could see. There was you, and somehow that was enough. Strange, isn't it? How one person can walk into a room carrying absolutely nothing, yet leave carrying pieces of your heart they never asked for. How one glance can feel heavier than 1,000 conversations. How one smile can stay with you long after the day has ended, long after the lights go out, long after you're lying awake staring at the ceiling, wondering why you're still thinking about someone who probably isn't thinking about you at all. And maybe that's the part that scares me. Not the feeling itself, but how quickly it arrived, how naturally it happened, how it slipped past every guard I had stationed around my heart. Because I wasn't looking for this. I wasn't waiting for some magical moment. I wasn't searching for a sign. In fact, I had become very good at expecting nothing, very good at protecting myself, very good at convincing myself that being careful was the same thing as being safe. But then I looked at your face and suddenly safety felt overrated. Because what is the point of protecting your heart so well that it never gets the chance to feel alive? What is the point of avoiding pain if it also means avoiding wonder, avoiding connection, avoiding the rare moments that make you stop and realize you're still capable of feeling something beautiful? Maybe that's why my heart jumped all over the place. Not because it was confused, not because it was weak, but because it had finally found a reason to wake up after all this time, after all the disappointments, after all the promises that led nowhere, after all the nights spent convincing myself that nothing could surprise me anymore. There you were, And suddenly the impossible felt possible. Not love, not yet. Something smaller, something quieter, something much more dangerous. Hope, the kind of hope that arrives softly, the kind that doesn't knock, the kind that simply sits beside you and whispers, "What if this time is different?" And maybe that's why I remember that moment so clearly. Not because it was dramatic, not because the world stopped spinning, not because fireworks exploded across the sky, but because something much rarer happened. For one brief second, my heart remembered how to believe. I looked at your face and my heart jumped all over the place. And honestly, it still hasn't found its way back. The truth is, before I looked at your face and felt my heart lose its direction, I had spent a long time teaching myself not to expect much from life. Not because I was bitter, not because I had stopped believing in love, but because disappointment has a quiet way of changing a person. Not all at once, not dramatically, just little by little, like water wearing down stone, like winter slowly stealing the leaves from a tree, like years passing without you realizing how much of yourself you've hidden away just to survive. Some people think loneliness is being alone. It isn't. Loneliness is answering "I'm fine" so many times that eventually you stop remembering what the truth sounds like. It's laughing in crowded rooms while carrying entire storms inside your chest. It's having conversations all day and still feeling unheard when the night arrives. It's learning how to carry your own pain because experience has taught you that not everyone stays long enough to help you hold it. And somewhere along the way, that became normal. I became normal, or at least I convinced myself I was. I woke up, I worked, I smiled, I went through the motions day after day, month after month, year after year. The world saw someone functioning, someone responsible, someone strong. But strength can be a very convincing disguise because what nobody sees is the exhaustion behind it. The constant effort required to keep moving when your heart has quietly stopped expecting anything extraordinary. I wasn't unhappy all the time. That's not how it works. The hardest loneliness isn't constant sadness. It's emotional numbness. It's reaching a point where nothing hurts enough to make you cry, but nothing excites you enough to make you feel alive either. You simply exist. You survive. You become skilled at filling empty spaces, a busy schedule, endless responsibilities, mindless distractions, anything to avoid sitting alone with the silence. Because silence asks dangerous questions. Questions like, when was the last time you truly felt understood? When was the last time someone looked at you and saw more than what you could offer? When was the last time your heart felt safe enough to stop defending itself? Questions I didn't have answers to. Or maybe I did. Maybe I was just afraid of them. You see, people often talk about heartbreak as if it comes from one person, one relationship, one goodbye. But sometimes heartbreak is cumulative, a collection of unfinished stories, unreturned feelings, broken promises, missed chances, people who said forever and meant until it became inconvenient. Every experience leaves behind something, a lesson, a scar, a warning sign, and eventually those warnings become habits. You stop texting first. You stop opening up. You stop saying what you really feel, not because you don't care, because you care too much. Because every disappointment teaches your heart another way to protect itself. And protection slowly becomes isolation without you even noticing. That was the strange thing. I didn't wake up one morning and decide to build walls. I built them one brick at a time, one disappointment, one betrayal, one unanswered hope, one quiet goodbye. until eventually the walls became so familiar that I mistook them for home. Safe, predictable, lonely, but home. And maybe that's why your arrival affected me so deeply. Because before you, I had become comfortable with emotional distance. I had stopped looking for miracles, stopped looking for signs, stopped imagining that life could still surprise me. I told myself I was realistic, mature, grounded. But if I'm being completely honest, I was tired, tired of hoping, tired of wondering, tired of giving pieces of my heart to situations that never became what I thought they could be. So I lowered my expectations, then lowered them again and again, until eventually the safest dream was no dream at all, no expectations, no risks, no possibility of disappointment. But there was a cost. There is always a cost. Because when you stop risking heartbreak, you also stop risking joy. When you stop opening doors, nothing can hurt you, but nothing beautiful can enter either. And that's the tragedy of self-protection. The walls keep pain out, but they also keep love out. They keep connection out. They keep hope out. For a long time, I thought that was a fair trade. I thought peace meant feeling less. I thought healing meant needing no one. I thought strength meant carrying everything alone. I was wrong because deep down beneath all the caution and all the carefully constructed independence, there was still a part of me waiting, a quiet part, a hidden part, a hopeful part, the part that still glanced at happy couples and wondered what it would feel like to have someone choose you every day, the part that still believed there had to be more than merely surviving, the part that still wanted to be seen, not admired, not needed, seen, completely, honestly, without pretending, without performing, without hiding. I buried that part of myself beneath responsibilities and routines. I told it to be quiet, to grow up, to stop expecting impossible things. And for a while, it listened. For a while, it disappeared into the background, or at least I thought it did, until one day I looked at your face, and suddenly that forgotten part of me opened its eyes again. The part I thought was gone, the part I thought life had already taught to stay asleep, the part that still believed that maybe, just maybe, the story wasn't over yet. And then you appeared, not with fireworks, not with some dramatic entrance that instantly changed everything. No grand declaration, no cinematic moment where the world suddenly stopped spinning. In fact, if someone else had been watching, they probably wouldn't have noticed anything special at all. That's the funny thing about the moments that change our lives. They rarely announce themselves. They arrive quietly, almost politely, like a soft knock on a door you've forgotten exists. And somehow, that's exactly how you entered mine. You didn't force your way into my thoughts. You didn't demand attention. You didn't try to become important. You simply existed. And for reasons I still can't fully explain, your presence felt different, not louder, not brighter, just warmer, like sunlight slipping through curtains after a long winter, like hearing your favorite song unexpectedly playing in the distance, like finding something you didn't realize you had been missing until it was suddenly there. At first, I ignored it, or at least I tried to. After all, I had spent years teaching myself not to read too much into things. Not every smile means something. Not every connection is destiny. Not every beautiful moment is the beginning of a beautiful story. Experience had taught me that, life had taught me that. So I told myself not to pay attention. I told myself it was nothing, just another person, just another conversation, just another passing moment. But then another moment came, and another, and another, And somehow, without realizing it, I started looking forward to them, not because something extraordinary happened, but because of how ordinary everything felt around you. And strangely, that was what made it extraordinary. You see, most people think love begins with excitement, with intensity, with overwhelming emotions, but sometimes it begins with peace. Sometimes it begins when someone enters your life and instead of making your heart feel chaotic, they make the chaos inside your heart grow quieter. That was the first thing I noticed. The quiet, not around us, inside me. The constant noise I'd been carrying for years seemed to soften whenever you were near. The endless overthinking, the exhausting self doubt, the invisible weight I had grown accustomed to carrying. For a few moments, it all became lighter, not gone, just lighter. And maybe that's why I couldn't stop noticing you, because peace is rare, much rarer than passion. Passion is easy. It burns brightly. It demands attention. Peace is different. Peace arrives gently. It sits beside you unnoticed until one day you realize you can finally breathe again. And that was what frightened me, because I had forgotten what that feeling was like, forgotten what it felt like to be around someone without needing to protect every vulnerable part of myself, forgotten what it felt like to simply enjoy a moment instead of preparing for its ending. For so long, every connection had come with caution. Every feeling had come with hesitation. Every hope had been followed by a warning. Be careful. Don't get attached. Don't expect too much. But around you, those warnings grew quieter, not because they disappeared, but because something else began speaking louder: curiosity, comfort, possibility, hope. And hope is a dangerous thing when you've spent years convincing yourself you don't need it. Because once hope returns, it begins changing everything. The way you see the future, the way you see yourself, the way you see another person, suddenly ordinary moments start feeling meaningful. A conversation lasts in your mind long after it ends. A smile becomes something you replay when you're alone. A simple memory becomes a place you revisit again and again. Not because you're trying to, because your heart keeps returning there on its own. And mine did. More often than I wanted to admit, I would catch myself remembering small details. The way your eyes softened when you listened, the way your smile appeared before your laughter, the calmness in your presence, the kindness in things most people would never notice. Little things, tiny things, the kinds of things nobody remembers unless they truly care. And that's when I started realizing something. This wasn't happening because you were perfect. You weren't some fantasy. You weren't an impossible dream. You were human, beautifully human. And maybe that was exactly why you felt so real. You didn't make me believe in perfection. You made me believe in connection. And those are very different things. Perfection creates distance. Connection creates closeness. Perfection feels unattainable. Connection feels like home. And every day, in ways both small and impossible to ignore, you began feeling a little more like home. Not the kind of home built from walls and ceilings, the kind built from understanding, from comfort, from being able to exist without pretending. The kind of home a tired heart spends years searching for, without even realizing it. And maybe that's why everything changed. Not in a single moment, not in a dramatic revelation, but slowly, quietly, like dawn replacing darkness, like winter surrendering to spring, like a heart that had spent years surviving, finally remembering how to live. I didn't know where this feeling would lead. I didn't know what story we were becoming. All I knew was this: after years of feeling lost inside my own life, your presence felt like a light, a quiet light, And for the first time in a very long time, I found myself wanting to follow it. Somewhere along the way, something inside me changed. Not suddenly, not in a way I could point to and say, there, that's where it happened. It was more subtle than that, like a tide slowly rising beneath the surface, like a song becoming louder without anyone touching the volume, like a seed quietly breaking open underground long before anyone sees the flower. The truth is, I didn't realize how deeply you had entered my thoughts until I started looking for you in moments when you weren't even there. And that frightened me because for years I had been in control, or at least I thought I was. I controlled my expectations, my emotions, my attachments. I knew how to keep people at a safe distance. I knew how to care without falling, how to admire without needing, how to walk away before my heart became too involved. Those rules had protected me until you, because around you, those rules began to feel useless. I would tell myself not to think about you, then find myself smiling at a memory hours later. I would promise myself not to get attached, then catch myself wondering how your day had been. I would insist that this was nothing, and then spend the entire evening replaying a conversation that lasted only a few minutes. Why, why did my mind keep returning to you? Why did ordinary moments suddenly feel extraordinary when they involved you? Why did your presence linger long after you were gone? I didn't know. And maybe that's what made it so overwhelming, because feelings are easier to manage when you understand them. This felt different. This felt like standing in the middle of an ocean while the current quietly changed direction beneath me. At first, I thought it was simple attraction, something temporary, something that would fade with time. But attraction doesn't stay with you like this. Attraction doesn't make your heart softer. It doesn't make you notice the small things. It doesn't make you care about someone's happiness when it has nothing to do with you. This was becoming something deeper, something I wasn't prepared for. And the deeper it became, the more divided I felt. Part of me wanted to move closer. Part of me wanted to run. One side of my heart whispered, what if this is real? The other side whispered, what if it ends the way everything else did? And suddenly, every step forward felt like a battle between hope and fear. Hope would remind me how peaceful your presence felt. Fear would remind me how painful disappointment could be. Hope would tell me to trust the connection. Fear would show me old scars. Hope would point toward possibility. Fear would point toward history. And some days, I genuinely didn't know which voice would win. Because here's the thing, nobody talks about when you've been hurt before, happiness can feel just as terrifying as heartbreak. Not because happiness is dangerous, because it gives you something to lose. The moment your heart starts caring, risk enters the room. The moment someone becomes important, vulnerability follows. The moment you begin imagining a future, you also begin fearing its absence. And I hated how much power that gave you over me. Not because you had done anything wrong. You hadn't. In fact, your kindness was part of the problem. Your warmth, your sincerity, the way you made things feel easy. Because every beautiful thing about you made my heart lean closer. And every step closer felt like another piece of armor falling away. The armor I had spent years building, the armor that told me not to trust too quickly, not to hope too much, not to believe in things that hadn't happened yet. But hearts are stubborn things. Sometimes they know things before we do. Sometimes they move ahead while our minds are still trying to catch up. And mine was running far ahead, farther than I wanted, farther than I admitted. I began noticing how different my days felt after seeing you, how certain moments became brighter, how ordinary routines became easier, how life itself seemed a little less heavy. And that realization terrified me Because I had worked so hard to become self sufficient, so hard to convince myself that I needed nobody, so hard to build a life that couldn't be shaken by another person's presence. Yet there I was, being shaken, not by chaos, not by drama, not by obsession, but by something much quieter, something much more dangerous, affection, real affection, the kind that grows slowly, the kind that roots itself deep inside your heart before you even notice it's there, the kind that doesn't arrive like lightning. It arrives like rain, soft at first, almost invisible, until one day you realize the entire landscape has changed. And by then, it's too late to pretend you don't feel it, too late to convince yourself it doesn't matter, too late to return to who you were before. Because once your heart truly sees someone, it cannot unsee them. Once it recognizes a connection, it cannot unknow it. And mine had already recognized something, something beautiful, something fragile, something worth protecting. The problem was, I still didn't know whether it was safe to believe in it. So every time I looked at you, my heart reacted the same way. Half of it wanted to move closer, half of it wanted to hide, half of it was filled with hope, half of it was filled with fear. And somewhere between those two extremes, my heart kept doing exactly what it had done the very first time. It jumped all over the place. Not because it was confused, not because it was weak, but because for the first time in years, it had something real to lose and something beautiful to dream about. The strange thing is, before you came into my life, I thought I knew exactly what I wanted, or at least I thought I did. Like most people, I had a list, a picture in my mind, an idea of what love was supposed to look like. Someone attractive, someone intelligent, someone who made life exciting, someone who could make me happy. Simple enough, right? But the older I became, the more I realized that those weren't the things my heart was truly searching for. They were just the things I had been taught to notice, the things people talk about, the things movies celebrate, the things social media turns into goals. But real loneliness has a way of teaching deeper lessons. It forces you to look beneath appearances, beneath fantasies, beneath all the superficial things we mistake for connection. And what I eventually discovered was this: I wasn't searching for perfection. I was searching for peace, not the kind of peace that comes from being alone, the kind that comes from finally feeling understood, the kind that allows you to put down the emotional weight you've been carrying for years, the kind that whispers, you don't have to fight so hard anymore. Because the truth is, life makes warriors out of all of us. Every disappointment teaches us to defend ourselves. Every heartbreak teaches us caution. Every betrayal teaches us distance. And after a while, we become so focused on surviving that we forget what it feels like to simply be loved, not admired, not desired, loved. There's a difference, a huge difference. Admiration looks at your strengths. Love notices your weaknesses and stays anyway. Desire is drawn to your best moments. Love remains during your worst ones. Admiration applauds who you appear to be. Love embraces who you actually are. And deep down, that was always what I wanted. Someone who wouldn't just celebrate the polished version of me, someone who could see the unfinished parts, the insecure parts, the exhausted parts, the parts I try so hard to hide from the world. And instead of walking away, stay, not because they had to, because they wanted to. Do you know how rare that is? To be truly seen, not judged, not fixed, not compared, simply seen. For years, I thought love was about finding the right person, Now I think it's about finding the person who makes you feel safe enough to be yourself, completely, honestly, without performance, without masks, without pretending everything is okay when it isn't. And that's why you felt different. Because when I imagined you, I didn't imagine perfection. I imagined comfort. I imagined coming home after the hardest day imaginable and knowing there was someone who genuinely cared how I felt, someone who listened to understand instead of listening to respond, someone who saw my struggles as something to share, not something to avoid. I imagined laughter that wasn't forced, conversations that didn't feel like work, silences that weren't awkward, a connection that didn't require constant effort to maintain because it was built on something deeper than convenience. I imagined waking up beside someone who still chose me after seeing every flaw, every insecurity, every scar, and somehow choosing me even more because of them. Maybe that's what real love is. Not finding someone perfect, finding someone whose imperfections feel like part of your favorite story, someone whose presence makes ordinary moments matter, someone who turns routine into memory, someone who makes an ordinary Tuesday feel more valuable than 1,000 exciting distractions. Because at the end of the day, life isn't made of grand moments. It's made of small ones, morning conversations, unexpected smiles, shared glances across crowded rooms, checking whether someone arrived home safely, remembering how they take their coffee, noticing when they're quieter than usual, the little things, always the little things. And somehow, when I thought about the future, those were the moments I wanted most. Not luxury, not excitement, not perfection, just connection, real connection, the kind that survives difficult seasons, the kind that grows stronger after disagreements, the kind that chooses understanding over pride, the kind that remains when life becomes messy and complicated. Because eventually, beauty changes, circumstances change, people change, life changes, but character remains, kindness remains, loyalty remains, compassion remains. And those are the things that become priceless with time. Maybe that's why my feelings for you kept growing, not because you fit some fantasy I had created, but because you reminded me of something I had nearly forgotten, what my heart was actually searching for. Not someone to rescue me, not someone to complete me, not someone to make my life perfect, just someone willing to walk beside me through good days, through bad days, through uncertainty, through growth, through all the chapters still waiting to be written, someone who could become both my safe place and my adventure, my comfort and my inspiration, my peace and my excitement. And maybe that's why every time I looked at you, my heart reacted the way it did. Because beneath all the attraction, beneath all the curiosity, beneath all the hope, my heart wasn't merely seeing a person. It was seeing a possibility I had stopped believing existed, the possibility that somewhere in this complicated world, there might still be someone whose soul feels like home. And for the first time in years, I wanted to believe that person could be you. And that's when the questions began. The dangerous questions, the ones that arrive late at night when the world grows quiet, the ones that slip into your mind when you're staring at the ceiling instead of sleeping, the ones you try to ignore during the day but somehow find you anyway. Because once my heart started believing in the possibility of you, a new fear appeared. Not the fear of loving you, not even the fear of losing you, something deeper, something far more personal. The fear that maybe I wasn't enough. It's strange how quickly the mind can turn something beautiful into something terrifying. One moment you're imagining what could be, The next, you're questioning whether you deserve it at all. And I wish I could tell you those doubts came from nowhere. I wish I could say they were irrational. But every insecurity has a history. Every fear has a story. Every wound leaves behind an echo. And some echoes stay with us much longer than we admit. You see, people often think confidence means never questioning yourself. That's not true. The strongest people I know question themselves constantly. They simply learn how to keep moving despite the questions. But when it came to you, those questions became louder because suddenly I cared. And whenever we truly care about something, we risk discovering all the places where we feel inadequate. I began wondering things I hadn't thought about in years. Was I good enough? Interesting enough? Strong enough? Would you see the person I was trying to become, or only the flaws I was still carrying? Would you admire the parts of me that seemed confident, then leave once you discovered the parts that weren't? Would you still stay if you knew how much overthinking lived inside my mind? How many insecurities I kept hidden behind smiles? How many battles I fought silently every day? Because here's the truth nobody talks about. Loving someone is one thing. Allowing yourself to be loved is another. And sometimes the second is much harder. Anyone can offer their heart, but receiving love requires vulnerability. It requires believing you're worthy of something beautiful. And that can feel impossible when you've spent years measuring yourself against impossible standards, years comparing, years criticizing, years focusing on every weakness while overlooking every strength. I had become an expert at seeing my shortcomings, the goals I hadn't reached, the mistakes I couldn't undo, the opportunities I had missed, the versions of myself I thought I should have become by now. And standing in the shadow of those expectations, it was easy to feel incomplete, easy to feel behind, easy to wonder if someone like you deserves someone better, someone more successful, more confident, more accomplished, someone who had everything figured out, someone who wasn't still learning how to heal parts of themselves. But the older I get, the more I realize something important. Nobody has everything figured out. Not really. Some people simply hide their uncertainty better than others. We're all carrying unfinished chapters. We're all learning. We're all growing. We're all trying to become better than who we were yesterday. Yet knowing that didn't completely silence the fear, because fear isn't always logical. Fear is emotional, and emotions don't ask for evidence. They create stories, stories that sound convincing, stories that whisper, what if you're not what they need? What if they eventually see your flaws and change their mind? What if you're building hope around something you can't keep? For a while, I listened to those stories. For a while, I believed them, but then something unexpected happened. I started looking at you differently, not as someone perfect, not as someone impossible, not as someone standing above me, just as another human being, a beautiful human being, yes, but still human, someone with fears of their own, dreams of their own, scars of their own, someone who probably questioned themselves more than they let the world see. And that realization changed something, because love isn't supposed to be a competition between two perfect people. It's supposed to be a partnership between two imperfect ones, two people choosing each other despite the flaws, despite the uncertainties, despite the unfinished parts. Maybe being enough doesn't mean being perfect. Maybe being enough means being honest, being present, being willing to grow, being willing to love someone consistently, even when life becomes difficult. Maybe being enough means showing up again and again with sincerity, with effort, with an open heart. And perhaps that's what I wanted to offer you. Not perfection. I don't have that not certainty. I don't have that either. What I could offer was something much more real. My truth, my loyalty, my willingness to stay, my desire to become the kind of person who protects what matters, the kind of person who values connection over ego, understanding over pride, growth over comfort. Because if loving you taught me anything, it taught me this. The goal isn't to become flawless before we deserve love. The goal is to keep becoming better while allowing ourselves to receive it. And maybe that's where my answer finally began. Not in certainty, not in confidence, but in acceptance, acceptance that I am still growing, still healing, still learning, and yet still worthy of love. Not because I have no flaws, because I am more than them. So, yes, sometimes I still wonder, sometimes I still question, sometimes I still hear those old fears trying to convince me that I am not enough. But whenever they appear, another voice speaks too. A quieter voice, a wiser voice, the voice that remembers how my heart felt when I first looked at your face. And that voice says, you do not need to be perfect to deserve something beautiful. You only need the courage to believe that you do. And perhaps for the first time in a very long time, I'm finally starting to believe it. And then one day, a thought appeared that I could no longer ignore. A simple thought, a terrifying thought, a question so small and yet so powerful that it changed everything. What if I never tell you? At first, it seemed harmless, just another passing question, just another possibility among countless others. But the more I sat with it, the heavier it became. Because suddenly, I wasn't imagining what could happen if I spoke. I was imagining what would happen if I didn't. And somehow, that possibility hurt even more. You see, fear has always been a convincing storyteller. For years, fear had protected me. Fear had taught me caution. Fear had taught me patience. Fear had reminded me of every time hope had ended in disappointment, every time trust had been misplaced, every time vulnerability had been met with silence. And because of that, fear always seemed wise, reasonable, responsible. It always had a list of arguments ready. Don't risk it. Don't complicate things. Don't make yourself vulnerable. Don't ruin what already exists. What if they don't feel the same? What if you're imagining something that isn't there? What if you're wrong? Those questions echoed inside me over and over again. And for a while, they almost convinced me, almost. But then another voice began speaking too, a quieter voice, not driven by fear, driven by truth. And that voice asked something different. What if they do? What if this connection is real? What if this moment was meant to be more than a silent memory? What if the greatest risk isn't speaking, but remaining silent forever? Because the truth is, regret has a different kind of pain. Heartbreak hurts, rejection hurts, disappointment hurts, but regret lingers. It stays. Years later, long after circumstances have changed, regret still returns to ask questions, questions that have no answers. What if I had been brave enough? What if I had said something? What if I had trusted my heart for once? What if those two words can haunt an entire lifetime? And slowly I began realizing something. I wasn't actually afraid of rejection. Not entirely. I was afraid of certainty. Because as long as I remained silent, possibility remained alive. As long as nothing was said, I could continue imagining, continue hoping, continue living inside the safety of uncertainty. Reality, however, requires courage. Reality asks us to step beyond imagination. Reality asks us to risk losing the dream in order to discover the truth. And that terrified me because by now you had become more than just someone I admired. You had become part of my daily thoughts, part of my future questions, part of the quiet hopes I carried without speaking aloud. I found traces of you everywhere, in songs, in sunsets, in random moments throughout the day, a joke I wanted to tell you, a story I wished you could hear, a place I imagined visiting together. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't obsessive. It was simply constant, like a quiet melody playing beneath everything else. And that was when I realized how deeply you mattered, not because you occupied every moment, because you appeared in the moments that mattered most, the moments when life felt meaningful, the moments when something beautiful happened and my first instinct was wishing you could see it too, because that's what affection eventually becomes, not merely wanting to share your life with them. The ordinary parts, the difficult parts, the unforgettable parts. And once I understood that, silence became harder. Every unspoken word felt heavier. Every hidden feeling felt larger. Every smile I kept to myself became another weight inside my chest. Until eventually I had to ask myself, how long can a heart carry a truth before it begins to break beneath its weight? Because feelings don't disappear simply because we ignore them. They grow quietly, patiently, like roots beneath the surface, invisible, until one day they become impossible to deny. And mine had reached that point. I could no longer pretend this was nothing. I could no longer dismiss it as curiosity or coincidence or temporary attraction. This mattered. You mattered. Whether I spoke the words or not, whether the outcome was beautiful or painful, the truth remained the same. My heart had already chosen. And perhaps that was the most frightening realization of all. Not that I loved the possibility of you, but that I cared enough to risk being hurt, because caring always carries risk. Every meaningful connection does. There are no guarantees, no promises, no certainty, only courage, the courage to be honest, the courage to be vulnerable, the courage to stand before another human being and say, this is how I feel, without knowing how the story ends, without knowing whether your heart will be welcomed or refused, without knowing anything except that the feeling is real. And maybe that's what love ultimately asks of us, not certainty, courage, the courage to stop hiding, the courage to stop running, the courage to let someone see the truth, even when that truth makes us tremble. So now I find myself standing at the edge of a moment suspended between silence and honesty, between fear and hope, between the safety of keeping everything inside and the freedom of finally letting it out. And perhaps for the first time in my life, I'm beginning to understand something important. The goal was never to protect my heart from every possible pain. The goal was to live honestly enough that no matter what happens, I have no regrets. Because one day, years from now, I don't want to remember your face and wonder what might have been. I don't want to carry unanswered questions into the future. I don't want our story to become another unfinished chapter. So if my voice shakes, if my heart races, if fear tries one last time to stop me, I will remember something. The moment I first looked at your face, the moment my heart jumped all over the place, the moment hope returned, and maybe, just maybe, that moment was never asking me to stay silent. Maybe it was asking me to be brave. So here I am, standing at the end of a story that never really began with certainty, a story that started with a glance, a face, a moment so small that most people would have forgotten it by now. And yet somehow that single moment changed something inside me forever. I looked at your face and my heart jumped all over the place. Funny, isn't it? How such a simple thing can carry so much meaning. Because if someone had asked me before I met you what I thought love looked like, I probably would have given them the wrong answer. I would have talked about chemistry, timing, compatibility, the things people usually talk about when they discuss relationships. But now, after everything I've felt, I think love begins somewhere much quieter. It begins the moment a closed heart starts opening again, the moment hope returns after a long absence, the moment someone makes you believe that maybe the world still holds beautiful surprises. And that's what you gave me. Not promises, not guarantees, not certainty, something much more valuable, possibility. The possibility that life still had chapters I hadn't read yet. The possibility that not every ending was permanent. The possibility that my heart wasn't as broken as I once believed. For a long time, I thought healing meant forgetting old pain, forgetting old disappointments, forgetting everyone who left. But healing doesn't work that way. Healing isn't forgetting. Healing is remembering without carrying the same weight. It's looking back at old wounds and realizing they no longer control your future. It's understanding that pain may explain who you became, but it doesn't get to decide who you become next. And somewhere during this journey, I finally understood that because before you, I was surviving. After you, I started living again. Not because you saved me. You didn't. No one can do that for another person. The truth is much more beautiful. You reminded me that I was capable of saving parts of myself I had abandoned, the hopeful parts, the vulnerable parts, the brave parts, the parts that still believed in connection despite everything they had experienced. Those parts had been asleep for a very long time. And somehow you woke them up, not intentionally, not dramatically, just by being yourself. And maybe that's one of the greatest gifts another person can ever give us. Not changing who we are, helping us remember who we were before fear convinced us to become someone else. Because fear changes people. Heartbreak changes people. Loneliness changes people. But love reminds people, it reminds us of our softness, our courage, our humanity, our ability to trust again, our ability to hope again, and most importantly, our ability to begin again. That's why no matter what happens after this moment, I don't consider this story a loss. Even if life takes us in different directions, even if our paths eventually separate, even if reality unfolds differently than my heart imagines, I will still be grateful because some people enter your life to stay and some people enter your life to awaken something. Both are gifts. Both matter. Both leave behind something beautiful. And you awakened something. You reminded me that the heart is stronger than fear, that hope is stronger than disappointment, that one meaningful connection can illuminate years of emotional darkness. You reminded me that being vulnerable is not weakness, it's courage, real courage, the kind that allows us to risk disappointment in exchange for something extraordinary, the kind that chooses openness over protection, the kind that says, I would rather feel deeply than not feel at all. And perhaps that is the greatest lesson of all. Life was never meant to be lived behind walls. Yes, walls keep pain out, but they also keep wonder out. They keep joy out. They keep connection out. And eventually they keep life out. I spent years believing those walls were protecting me. Now I understand they were only protecting my fears, because the most meaningful moments in life happen when we step beyond them, when we allow ourselves to care, to trust, to hope, to love, even when there are no guarantees, especially when there are no guarantees. So if there's one thing I want to carry forward from all of this, It is not the fear, not the uncertainty, not even the questions that still remain unanswered. It is the gratitude for the way my heart came alive again, gratitude for the way hope returned when I least expected it, gratitude for the way one person reminded me that life is still capable of surprising us. And maybe that's where this story truly ends. Not with certainty, not with possession, not with a perfect conclusion, but with faith. Faith that some connections arrive for a reason. Faith that vulnerability is worth the risk. Faith that love, in whatever form it arrives, leaves us better than it found us. Because when I first looked at your face, I thought my heart was losing control. Now I realize something different. My heart wasn't falling apart. It was waking up after years of silence, after years of caution, after years of convincing itself that nothing could truly move it anymore. It was waking up, and maybe that was the miracle all along. So, yes, I looked at your face, my heart jumped all over the place, and for the first time in a very long time, I smiled because I finally understood what that feeling meant. It wasn't chaos, it wasn't confusion, it wasn't fear, it was hope. And hope, after all these years, had finally found its way home.